tough. So I would just say, just lean into the Lord, process, let them know how much you love them, how much you're sorry for what they're going through. No matter what happens, you're going to be by their side. But at the same token, let them know that you would love to see them pull through this, and hopefully they will.
Yeah. And the thing that comes to my mind is this is those moments when the vine and branch stuff is really important. When Jesus said, I'm the vine and you're the branches. So I really want to encourage you to foster your intimacy with Jesus. And in Psalm 1, delight yourself in the Lord, meditate in His Word, delight in it, and you'll be like that tree planted by the rivers of waters, bearing fruit in its season. And this is a season where there's things that you've been asked to step into a role that you don't know, like how do I act as a leader in this situation? But the fruit of the Spirit is going to be, you just want to have that loaf of hanging fruit for your siblings to be blessed by and nourished by, and for your parents in their, whatever it is they're going through, that there's going to be something in your life that both of them, no matter what, who's the right, who's in the wrong, we don't know anything of it, but for you to be that person in the middle of their relationship or just present in their lives at this time is really important as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, other things we don't know about Rogelio's situation, what led to his parents feeling this way. We also don't know Rogelio's age, how old his younger sisters are. We don't know, but he says it's a tough situation. As the oldest sibling, he's been told he has to act as the leader in this situation. So we don't know if he's like a 17-year-old kid, 37-year-old adult with a family of his own. I mean, we don't know. But what do you say about the pressure that sometimes people might feel about they're the ones that have to lead now that the two people that are supposed to be leading the family are falling apart?
Well, I would say that you can feel that depending on the situation. But again, this answer would kind of be more altered if I knew the situation. So you could be in a situation where you have parents divorcing because of absolute dysfunction in the home, and you already have a hard time living in that home. And then if you're somebody that's growing up and you're more of a responsible one, then you have to take on so much more of a load. And so you have kids that tend to maybe feel the weight of that, and they look and they make observations from their parents, and they go, boy, I'm going to do everything that they didn't do, and that's how I'm going to get my life vision. Lots of irresponsibility, lots of poor decision-making, and so that feels like a lot of weight to keep everybody intact. You get others who will just say, well, the heck with it then, and then they just buckle. So that's another one of those questions I would just say is if anybody's feeling pressure, that's what we have to remember, that we don't bear the weight of our parents' responsibilities in the sense that it's our responsibility, but it might mean that more responsibility will come your way. It depends on the situation. I mean, heck, you might have to help out around the house more if dad takes off. You might be assuming those chores. So I would have to ask questions, even know how to probably answer that one.
Yeah. Again, it's just like if being is more important than doing. That's my thing. It's like, you just be near Jesus. You just be the man Jesus wants you to be, regardless of your age. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's some boundary in that. There's some limit. There's if you're 8 years old and your siblings are 5 and 4, well, maybe not so much. But even if you're a teenager, there's just something about the way Jesus can express himself through somebody's life that becomes life-giving. That, you can be the balm of Gilead. You can bring that compassion of God into a situation without even saying a word, just by being there, being present. So again, without all the details, we could get a lot more specific in how that would look, but I think being is a big thing.
Good.
Rogelio, thank you for sending in your question online. 888-564-6173 is our number. We're going to do one more that was sent in online before we go to the phones. 888-564-6173. This one here is from Katrina, who is asking about Philippians 4:6. It's a verse we all know. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So Katrina says that a pastor said the word supplication in the original language meant detailed. Is this correct? I always thought it meant earnestly. What is it, Bobby?
When I click on the Greek word for supplication here, I don't see desis, and it is in BDAG, which is the best lexicon that you can leverage.
Yep.
And it says an urgent request to meet a need exclusively addressed to God. And then it gives all these different examples of how the word is used that way. I would not, break a leg arguing on this one because I understand what he's probably saying, like supplication means to be detailed in our prayer. But I think that sounds more like something that could have been found in Webster's, unless I'm missing it. But what I see here is it's just an urgent request and make your supplication known. It makes sense that your request would be detailed. I just don't know where the person got it, but I'm looking at the best lexicon in the world right before my eyes right now. And urgent request to meet a need.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Is this an example, perhaps, and we don't know who the pastor is that said this, but, where they dive deep into certain, like you said, maybe they looked it up in Webster's and that's what it says. So they said, we're going to use it here in our Bible study. And it means that you've got to be detailed whenever you give because we've heard that before too, where if you just tell God, you pray, God, give me a job, and then you wind up at McDonald's.
Yeah,
not that there's anything wrong with that, but when it's other people would say, no, you have to be detailed. Say you want to be the CEO of McDonald's. You want to make $30 million a year, et cetera, et cetera. So could that have been what was mentioned in this Bible study? We don't know.
I think sometimes what happens, Richard, I don't know if you ever feel that too. I think we get more detailed when it comes to interpreting the Bible than we need to. So we love the idea. Okay, so eisegesis means to read something into the Bible. But I think you can do so much exegesis that you're also reading things in the Bible. Yeah. Like, for example, wasn't it like Martin Lloyd-Jones who did 12 years on the book of Romans? We might have said more. Like, I remember when I was in seminary and Harold Hoehner came out with a commentary on Ephesians, and this thing was, a beast. I mean, it might have been like 700 pages. And I get that there's a lot to be written there, but I'm also thinking this is a 6-chapter book, and you can sit down and read it in 20 minutes. And if you have to read a commentary of 700 pages, now I know he's going to interact with all the other works and stuff, but there can be a sense where I fear that we get so into the details, so to speak, that we miss the forest for the trees and miss the big idea. And people leave church, they're, oh man, my pastor's so deep. But I'm going, look, if we don't apply the scriptures to our heart, it's about the deep life of being connected to Jesus, as you were talking about.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes, I'm sure there are resources where somebody might actually read that, like, this is what this means. I don't read Greek or Hebrew, but I do know BDAG is a go-to thing, and I know there are other resources. But I know one of the things that we need to be careful of is when we're looking at our English Bibles, we're kind of seeing the best of the best of what scholarship can bring to us in terms of translating a Greek manuscript into our English language. And I know you would know this far more than I in terms of the process of that, but I think one of the things we need to remember is that, there is no generally speaking, there's no this is the definition of this word. It's like there's a semantic range of definitions, and so all of these guys that are translating the Greek and Hebrew manuscripts into English, they're dead serious about the context and how the context is going to determine the very nuanced definition that they're going to give to that word. And that's why you'll see some varied definitions in various English translations, but they're all pretty much running down the same lane, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think we just want to be careful that we're not trying to stretch to be unique, to have some new idea. Like guys have really who have devoted their lives to knowing these ancient languages, and then they're brilliant in understanding the English language and grammar and syntax and all those things in two domains, and to give us a meaning. I mean, I'm looking down here, in Logos, and I'm seeing BDAG, I'm seeing word studies in the New Testament, I'm seeing Lau and Nita, I'm seeing all these great lexicons, and they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
With a range, maybe 2-3 words difference, but like entreat, request, pray, prayer, petition, entreaty, petition, supplication. I mean, they're all saying the same thing. So, like, let's just keep it at that. What is that going to mean for you when you make your supplication? You might just be you don't know how to pray, but specifically, you're overwhelmed. You've been looking for a job for so long, and you're just not sure what it is you're supposed to be doing. And you just make your supplication, and sometimes you're just groaning before the Lord. That would be supplication. Don't get too, like you said, don't make it more complicated than it is.
Yeah, something like as it relates to our Bibles in English, it's helpful to remember that the translating committee, they give us what they believe is the best word.
Yeah.
If it's a literal translation, and that attempted to be as word for word as they could.
Yeah, formal.
And so what ends up happening is they would have argued for that's the best word. So when we do start saying, well, the Greek says this, the Hebrew says this, that's fine, but we need to realize that we're contesting in some ways too, because otherwise I think we can leave people to think that I have to dig in to the Greek and Hebrew to really understand my English. Now, there's places this is helpful. For example, with the word love, we talk about storge, eros, agape, phileo, different uses of it. So those will have different meanings. Then there is synonyms, and that's usually what's happening with the different translations. They're synonyms, and so you go and you go, oh, these. Now, if you see a different two words that aren't synonyms in different translations, then you go, maybe there's a textual problem. I think the Greek can be interesting to pull out. So, like for example, if you're teaching through Titus and you're in chapter 1, and Paul says to Titus, "I left you in Crete to put in order." What needs to be, orderly. And he's talking about raising up elders that can put in order. And the Greek word for order is orthos. And it's from where we get the word orthodontist, to make straight. So I left you in Crete to make straight what is crooked. Yeah. And so you go, oh, well, that's pretty cool, because it tells us where we got a word. Yes.
Interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Katrina, thank you for sending in your email today on Pastor's Perspective. And now we'll go to the phones. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino are here to answer your questions. Oh, boy.
That's great.
Okay, so Daniel, we will talk to you after we go to Tony in San Diego. Speaking of letting your requests be made known to God, Tony's got a question about prayer. Go ahead, Tony. What is your question?
Hi, pastors. Thanks for taking my call. My question is there a difference in how God answers prayer, whether we pray for it once and be faithful and wait for him to answer, or to be, as what the Bible tells us, to never stop praying multiple times a day for months, weeks or months?
Or years.
And even years. Whether it's, and does that influence how he answers the prayer, or influence his perfect timing? Or is his perfect timing set in stone, and praying a lot of times doesn't change his timing or how he answers it?
Okay. Bobby, what would you say to Tony?
This is difficult as it relates to how long do we pray about something. I think that Paul, the apostle, for example, he prayed for the thorn in the flesh. He pleaded on 3 different occasions, and the Lord will often say, that God didn't, answer his prayer. Well, he didn't answer his prayer to take away the thorn, but he answered his prayer to quit praying about it. In the sense that, like, hey, you don't have to keep doing this. In other words, he got what he needed to get out of seeking God with this thorn, and that is that God's grace will be sufficient. And sometimes you'll bump into a spiritual discovery. So somebody might be praying for, this big house or whatever, and God will say, you know what, be content in me. And so they'll learn through their prayer that their discontentment is the issue. And so sometimes God will use our pursuing him for one thing to show us that we need another thing. And it takes some pursuing. And on that occasion, it was 3 intense prayer moments. Other times, we'll get an answer quickly. Other times, it's years. But I would say, I know in my own life, how do you even know when to keep praying and if it's God's will? Because that's the other thing. Like, I don't want to keep pestering God about something that's not his will for me. Because sometimes prayer can be like that, right? Like, I'm going to try and talk him into it. Even worry can be that way. There's something about my life, like if the circumstances feel off, I almost feel like I need to take on the emotional worry to show God I'm taking it seriously. It's almost hard to believe that, like, when the circumstances are rough, that I shouldn't be worried. But that's not good for my mental health. So I would say in my own life, I don't know if you feel this, Richard, but I do sense that the thing that kind of, when I sense a pressing to keep praying about something, that's kind of how I can start discerning, like, wow, I really feel heavy about this. Maybe God is going to do something in this area. So many things that I just throw up and they just go away. I don't necessarily know how serious that was.
Yeah. And then, you add into that whole scene, it's like you ask the Lord about a specific thing, like wisdom or about a need, and you pray that when you get up and you're on your way to work and you walk in the door and the prayer's answered.
Yep.
And then, there are other things that you're praying and you're not seeing an answer, and you're praying and you're not seeing an answer. And I think there's those times, when you were speaking, Bobby, I really felt like there are times when you feel released from having to pray. Like God goes, that's it. You just need to stop. Whatever that was, I've got this. Now you just trust me for this. And I think, but there are other times you just go, I just can't stop praying for this. I cannot not pray for this. Prayer is it's not an easy bit of business, and if we want to try to simplify it, and I know it's very easy to feel like, well, why does God answer this guy's prayer? And I'm asking for essentially the same thing, and he's not answering mine. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. And then you can slide into that domain concerning prayer. And then you start feeling condemned, like, well, obviously there's some reason God's not answering my prayer, because this person must be more righteous or more godly, and God loves him more, or whatever. And prayer can be so difficult sometimes to just keep leaning into God, period. And I know Char mentioned this yesterday, where he was talking about don't confuse faith with trusting. Like, we sometimes think faith, like, I have faith in what the Bible says about Jesus. I believe these things to be true. But then we have to trust every day in those things. We have to trust in the Jesus that we have placed our faith in. And I'm trusting in Jesus. So when I'm not hearing my prayers answered, I'm still trusting in Jesus. Not having my prayer answered doesn't discount the things I say. I believe these things to be true about Jesus. I'm going to live as though they're true. And I think that's the essence of trusting. And so I think this whole, is there a difference in God answering prayers? And pray once for something or praying constantly. I was thinking, like, Jesus, I was looking back to our wonderful friends in BDAG, the whole idea of, when Jesus is saying, ask and it will be given, seek and you will find, knock. And I'm looking at it, and it's in the present, which means it's an ongoing action. It has not yet been concluded. And so I'm looking at this going, well, keep asking.
Yeah.
Keep knocking. Keep seeking. He doesn't say for how long. He just says keep doing it. And I think there's just, life is going to prove. And you just, on the front end, it was great what you just saying, like, God has us keep asking sometimes because he's going to shape us. There's things He wants us. There's an answer He has for us, but it's not the things we're asking for.
Yeah, when I really feel like I've done this before, where I put a time limit on it. Now you feel a little weird doing that because
Yeah.
you don't want to control God, but it's more out of like, and I sensed it because it was a timing. Like sometimes you have a certain amount of time for something, and so it would be something like, God, I don't want to vex you with coming to prayer on this constantly, or vex myself if this isn't the direction I'm going to go. So I was wondering if you'd be so gracious to help me to have an answer on this date. Like I've literally prayed for it something to happen circumstantially on a date. And I said, just because I want to be able to measure that this is from you. And I've actually seen him do that. And that's pretty cool. And I'm walking through the day in total faith, like looking for something. Now, the danger is you might start seeing things that you aren't supposed to see either. But I don't know, this is the thing where circumstances, you can have God answer a circumstance that's so powerful to you and then go tell someone and they're like, but you know it in your spirit how powerful it was and it's meaningful. And, you just put that in the individual category of how He works through each of us.
Now, isn't there also the danger of, setting a fleece? Because some might think that what you just did by setting a date, by telling
Right.
God, hey, I need
wouldn't always
an
do
answer
that.
by Tuesday. Yeah. So what do you tell people about setting a fleece? Is that something you?
Well, I think that there's not a one size fits all way to go about our prayer life. There's not a formula. I mean, when it comes to prayer, really what we're looking for in these moments is we're just wanting some provisional guidance. Like when it comes to character, it's pretty easy to know what the Bible has to say about that and start praying for God to do that. And we can know that He'll work that character into us. Now, here's the thing. If we ask God to give us, patience, we don't realize necessarily what that means. Like, how's typically the way God forms character in us is He puts us in the opposite situation. So if you want to develop patience, then you're going to do so on the freeway in traffic. If you're going to if you want to be a more forgiving person, well, then that means you got to get hurt so that you can forgive. If you want to be somebody that learns how to have contentment, well, that might mean that you don't get a raise for a few years. So in other words, we got to think about when we're praying through some of these things, because all of this stuff tends to be cultivated in us through being placed in situations that are the opposite, because it's through that resistance that the fruit emerges.
Yeah, and as you're speaking about those things, it's just like I'm thinking, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness.
Yeah.
And He said, that's for you guys. These other guys, they're asking about all this other stuff, and they're worried about all of these other things. And your Father knows you have need of them. And so that statement means we have the confidence to go to our Heavenly Father, knowing that He knows our needs. And we can pray, give us this day our daily bread. And Lord, you know what that's going to look like. But the character bit of it, I'm wanting His kingdom. I want His reign in my life. I want to see His reign expanded in the world around me. And I want to walk in His ways. His ways are righteousness and justice. So I want to seek those things. And as the character stuff is being developed in us, God goes, I got you. I've got these other things. And I think, sometimes we get the priorities upside down. So I think sometimes.
Yeah, good point.
So,
What about pairing prayer with fasting? Is fasting a way to show God that you're really serious about something, that you need something to go in a certain direction by a certain date? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Self-flagellation is, really good. Just, whipping yourself and
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think, restate it one more time.
Well, just when it comes
Fasting
to...
is showing I'm serious.
Yes.
that was just a senior moment on Richard.
No, it was. I got sidetracked over here for a minute
It's Bobby started
found
talking
me
about.
out.
Yes.
about that jacket.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think God needs to know that we're serious. He knows us. And fasting doesn't do that at all. I think fasting is a discipline that He might want us to joyfully and gladly enter into for purposes that He has in mind for us. But I do think that if we have to convince God that we're serious, I doubt if we're ever as serious as we should be. So,
Tony, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more of your questions. What would you like to ask Dr. Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, who is here in town with us today? Give him a call, 888-564-6173. Pastor Richard Cimino is here, too. He's one of the assistant pastors at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, sitting in for Brian Broderson. And we'd love to chat with you next at 888-564-6173. For sure, we're going to Daniel when we come back from the break, but you might be after that. 888-564-6173. Grab an open line here on Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. Back on Pastor's Perspective. Thank you for joining us there on the radio, or maybe you're watching from the comfort of your couch on Facebook or YouTube. Either way, we welcome your phone calls as well. 888-564-6173 is the number. We're going to be here till 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 5th of November, and then we'll go out and vote. No, I'm joking. I think we've already, well, I hope Bobby did, because he has to vote in North Carolina.
That's right,
He's here in
yes.
California. Yes, he took care of his before he came out to join us. Richard Cimino's in the studio with us too, and we want to chat with you at 888-564-6173. Let's go to Virginia. Here is Daniel, who's listening to us on Equip FM. Hi there, Daniel. How can we help you?
Hello. Thank y'all for taking my call. I've been an alcoholic for years, drunkard, if you will, and I've been trying to just kick it, just not do that no more. Been praying. I went to a couple of rehabs and whatnot. My question to y'all is, what is my next step? What do I do now? Do y'all have any sort of suggestions for me?
Bobby.
Are you a believer, Daniel?
Yes, I am. Yes, sir.
Okay. Boy, I'm also a recovering alcoholic as well, and so I get the torment there. So obviously, what it means, to be an alcoholic, one who obsesses on it and then wants a sip is taken, the phenomenon of crave kicks in. The question is staying away from it. And this is one of those things I feel like just sharing, my own experience, strength, and hope. You almost just got to ride that out. Sometimes you hear these stories of believers who, they just have this experience and they never had an urge to drink again. And how wonderful that would be, but that's just not the way it works for everybody. Mm-hmm. And if God was to do that, that would be beautiful. But a lot of times, perhaps the fight to get clean is part of, number one, the consequence of getting into that situation. But number two, it's the battle of finding victory from the feeling like a slave to alcohol. That also helps you to never want to return again. So sometimes perhaps those that just get a quick fix, boop, it just lifted. Well, the person will appreciate their sobriety a lot more when you have to fight for it. I think that in the same way that we become an alcoholic is through feeding the desire to quit alcohol, you have to starve that desire out. And it's almost like maybe focusing on believing that there's great character that can be developed while you're just feeling like your insides are just being tortured for a drink. It is absolutely brutal. So perhaps it could be like just on a piece of paper, maybe writing out what are some qualities that could be built into me by learning how to just ride out some hardcore craves. I'll learn perseverance. I'll learn trust. I'll develop self-control. And, I look at it like addiction, kind of like a person on the side at a beach, and they're just beat up by the waves, and they're laying there on the shore. And, when you're stuck in addiction, you try to get up and walk away, but then another wave comes of temptation, and it's like, you take it and you get slammed down again, but then you try to get back up and walk away, and then another wave comes. Well, the deeper we are into addiction, those sets come faster and more furious and more brutal. And so we got to make that water placid. We got to slow down the ocean of temptation. And I would say that you can know for sure that if you will just ride out the agony and almost just get more, you almost have to be willing to have like just find a fight in the middle, like put on your Rocky hat, so to speak, and just be like, how do okay, there's a wave coming. What do I need to do to survive, right? So if you're a big wave surfer, you got to practice holding your breath for 5 minutes. It's almost like the game plan for when the craves come in. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call someone. I'm going to call. I'm going to call out to the Lord. I'm going to I'm going to memorize some verses on temptation. I'm going to read my list that I wrote down of the benefits of learning how to sit in the angst. Because one thing about addicts is they don't like to suffer, and that's part of the reason they stay stuck. And so I really do believe that what happens is those, while the waves might still come in time and never go away altogether, it won't be like fast sets coming in constantly. And you just have to believe that. And so the type of things, one day at a time, 2 days in a week, not to worry about yesterday and tomorrow, leaning on the Lord, calling a friend, and for me, the best thing, like my wife knows, like whenever have to work on something, because if it was the alcohol or if it was, nicotine, whatever it is that she sees me struggling with, I have to distract myself. And so a lot of times it's like I become the greatest maid my wife ever found. I take that, I just start cleaning things like in the most, so go get some cleaning products as well and just start cleaning things. Like just do whatever to distract yourself. Those are just some things I'd share.
Now, Daniel, have you tried like a Celebrate Recovery group?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How did that go?
Not so well around here.
Okay.
Great group. I love the people and all that sort of thing, but it just didn't seem to help me at all.
Yeah, and sometimes we just say things like that as a one size fits all. Like, oh yeah, if it helped one person, it's going to help everybody. So maybe that wasn't the case with Daniel.
Well, I mean, I do think some sort of a recovery group is helpful, but it's almost like this detox has got to happen. There's a insanity that's going on in your head right now, Daniel, and I get that. It's just it's a horrible place to be, and the only way out of that insanity is to just not keep biting the bullet again, because just writing things down like, okay, if I drink, I'm going to feel guilty. If I drink, I'm going to weaken myself. If I drink, I'm just going to lay on that side of the shore. If I keep drinking, I'm not going to be able to walk in God's plan for me. If I drink, I can see more consequences. I mean, just write out the consequences if you keep this up. Write out the blessings and promises that are going to be there. And I just know that it's a hard road of just believing that will starve itself out. I mean, those hunger pains for alcohol, you might have a mental game that you have to always fight, but the physical piece that you're feeling, the withdrawal, I mean, and that might mean going into a treatment center to work this mental game plan.
Daniel, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Now let's talk to Karen in Fontana. You are on with Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino. Welcome. Karen, are you there? Did you press mute on your phone, Karen?
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much for accepting my call.
Sure thing. How can we help?
So my question is regarding heaven. So my father passed away a few years ago from brain cancer. Happened so suddenly. And after that, people from church would always tell us, oh, well, God doesn't want to see you guys upset. I know some of my sisters and myself have made some choices that I know our father wouldn't be happy with. And then, they would say, oh, well, he wouldn't be happy with those decisions. And then I start thinking, okay, if my father is seeing that we're upset or going through a difficult time, if he is in heaven, then just like any parent, if I see my daughter's in pain, that's going to cause pain for me. So then I start thinking, well, is he really seeing me? Because if he is, then he wouldn't be happy with us, if that makes sense. So I'm just kind of curious to know where in Scripture would it kind of talk about, what's a person's role once they go to heaven?
Okay. Richard Cimino, what would you say to Karen?
Well, if there's a place that I would think that might be the case in the book of Revelation in chapter 6, verses 9 through 11, it says, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne, and they cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And then they were given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were killed as they themselves had been. A guy named Randy Alcorn wrote a book titled Heaven, and it's a very thought-provoking book. And I was blessed in a lot of ways by it. And he makes this statement. He says, the martyrs are fully conscious, rational, and aware of each other, God, and the situation on earth. And he says, if the martyrs in heaven know that God hasn't yet brought judgment on their persecutors, it seems evident that the inhabitants of heaven can see what's happening on the earth, at least to some extent. And honestly, I've heard, especially at memorial services, so many people talking about, well, they're going to look down on you from heaven, and your mom's or whoever your loved one is, they're going to see it, and so they're going to know what's going on in your life. You're not going to be alone. And I just don't know quite where to grab that from, other than the possibility of what it's seen in here. And the one thing I do know is there's a God in heaven who sees us, and He is super aware of everything about our lives. He knows, if He knows when a sparrow falls out of heaven, how much more does He know about us and everything we're going through? And our first consideration should be, you know what, the Lord's looking at the way I'm dealing with my siblings right now. So that'd be my response.
Yeah. Bobby, any thoughts?
Oh, great word.
Yep. Karen, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. To Murrieta we go. Here's Marla. How can we help you today, Marla?
Hi, can you hear me okay? I turned my radio down because I didn't want it to cause distortion or anything.
Yeah, when you call into the program, you'll be able to hear us on the telephone. So we do advise everybody on hold right now, in fact, turn off your radio so that if we go to you, we won't get that feedback or anything. You'll just hear us right here on the phone. So what's up, Marla?
Okay, well, thank you for taking my call. I really need prayer and advice. I have a daughter. She's been through NA recovery, and she was brought up in the church. But again, we were a family in dysfunction, not quite all healed. So I'm claiming the promise that God will bring her back. She has a heart after people that are still struggling with that, and is training, going to school to do that. And yet she wants to set boundaries. I understand that. I'm just wondering, how do I not be a person who understands boundaries, but yet I don't want to be estranged from her? She just had a birthday. She didn't want me to participate, so I didn't. But it hurts like the dickens. Like I said, I'm claiming that promise. We trained them up. My son went to Bible college, and he's wanted to be a pastor or music worship leader, and he tells her straight like it is that, if you're going to choose a lifestyle as you are with they, them, identifiers such as that, and you're going to participate in that, then, God certainly doesn't hate you, but he doesn't accept that behavior. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. She just doesn't feel accepted. She doesn't feel loved, even though she is. And I know deep down she knows she is. But I don't know. I was thinking, write a letter, text, do a text message. I don't like this. I don't want it to be like this, but I don't know how to balance.
Yeah.
I need to find a balance.
How do you when somebody asks you to respect their boundaries, but yet you see them in a situation that you'd rather that they not be in, and you love them. I mean, this is Marla's daughter. What do you do, Bobby?
This is tough because we bump into these kind of questions a lot, and they're not as easy to answer as a straightforward Bible question. And so I get nervous answering this because I don't understand the history. Mm-hmm. So take what I say through the filter of the context that you're living in. Sometimes people put up boundaries in their life because they're needed, because there's abuse that comes from loved ones that's legitimate, and they just need to be careful. Other times people put up boundaries because they don't like the beliefs of their family compared to what they now believe, and they have boundaries because they don't want to have to deal with the difference of those beliefs and be challenged by that. I suspect that could be part of maybe what's going on here, a sense that she knows that her lifestyle is not in accord with the way that she was raised. But nevertheless, keep the relationship, I would say. I mean, you obviously raised her, and she knows what you believe. And I would say, as hard as it is, try to put on the friend hat, because the mom hat might be tempted to control or smother, those types of things, which are all rooted in a heart of love. But I would say she obviously knows what you believe, what your family believes, because that's the family that raised her. And then she still, in spite of that, has went another way. And I do think that maybe the boundaries that are up, it could maybe see that those boundaries come down if there can be an agreement that, hey, let's just try to build our friendship right now and not talk about what you're doing on whether it's right or wrong. Like, that's something that we just don't always have to keep saying, because that will create stress on the relationship. So if you said something like, hey, is the relationship experiencing tension because you're feeling like, we keep bringing up our concern for you about your lifestyle? Well, we can't, while we can't agree with it, maybe we have to agree to not talk about this for a season so that we can build stuff up. And even though it's not going to be maybe the deep kind of community that we ultimately want, it's better than no community at all.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, when it comes to Marla just reaching out to her daughter as, trying to build the friendship, the thing about that, I would say, is as friends, sometimes we ask each other, so how's the family? And in this case, if Marla asks that question, it's going to be, Marla probably won't ask that question because she knows what the answer is going to be,
Yeah, I think you can ask. All I can do is think if my kids were in the same situation, I would still want to ask. It's just she might not get the daughter might not get the response because it's not going to be easy to celebrate some of the things that maybe her daughter's engaged in. But I don't know. There's got to be a way to have a relationship where you just don't cancel each other's. And unfortunately, this is the mode. I mean, a lot of kids are growing up. They need their safe spaces. And sometimes boundaries are just an excuse for people to not have to face the real issue.
Yeah.
Now, I got to put boundaries up because I don't feel safe, but it's like those boundaries are preventing you from really growing too. So,
Richard, any thoughts?
Yeah, but I just want to agree with what Bobby said on the...
I appreciate that. I'm glad that you want to agree
with what you said.
We don't want him to lose his train of thought again.
Especially, don't do that to me. Especially on the fact that if you've made yourself clear, this is what I believe to be true, and then from that point forward, that doesn't need to be a spoken anymore. What needs to happen is that you continue to, as best as you know, express the love of Jesus for her, have compassion for her when she's hurting, acknowledge her struggles, her hardships, and because you've made it clear, this is what I believe God has to say about gender and sexuality. But now I'm going to love you, and you have to let the Holy Spirit deal with the truth that you've already communicated, and where there has been dysfunction in the family, you, as best as you can, try to restore functionality, make it not be dysfunctional.
Yeah.
To just take away any other hindrances to her understanding that you're loving her with the love of God, right where she's at, and you're trusting God to bring her someplace that she can't even consider being.
Marla, I think, mentioned that her daughter is learning about Narcotics Anonymous and how to help other people that are struggling in that situation. So that could just be something that they discuss, so that it doesn't have to be about the, familial things and everything else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Marla, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go out to Phelan, California. Here is Candace. Welcome. Thanks for listening on the K-Wave app. How can we help you?
Hello. Good afternoon. So I have a question about, I guess it's numbers. So did the floods kill every living thing on earth? And if so, who are the giants that the Israelites encountered in the Valley of Eshcol in Numbers?
What would you say, Bobby?
Well, there is a sense where it's going to depend on how you interpret the flood story. And so there are people who will say that it's exaggerative language when it's talking about, all the earth is destroyed, every living thing, in the same way like when you hear that language used with the conquest of Canaan, and everybody wasn't necessarily, or wasn't destroyed. So you have people who believe in a local flood. And so then if that's what somebody takes as a position, like Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible Answer Man, that's his position, and a number of other people that are, critical thinkers. But that would solve the problem. If you take it as a universal flood, then obviously everything wasn't destroyed because you did have Noah and the animals on the flood, so there could be a repopulation. But there is this sense where you think about, like, did every single organism die outside of that ark? And if you're a universal flood person, you'll arrive at that conclusion. Then what do we do to make account for the giants? So in Genesis chapter 6, we learn about the Nephilim, these giants, and some would say that, that this is the offspring of the fallen angels, having relations with humanity, and others will give different explanations, like, kings or people from Seth's line. But it's difficult to know exactly how to account always for the aftermath. Was there another moment that the Bible doesn't record where there was some sort of, fallen angels repopulating again? Just because the Bible doesn't say that doesn't mean it's not a plausible explanation. So all that to say, you see that and you go, well, that doesn't mean you have to dismiss a universal flood account. But just because the Bible might not give an account specifically on how these giants would have, came about after the fact, doesn't mean that that couldn't have happened that way. It also could provide evidence that the definition best understood for the Nephilim would be the fallen angels cohabiting with, because they could have done that again. That's just one thought that I have. I don't know. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, I think there was a time when I was like kind of in the, early days of my faith, and, Chuck Missler would talk a lot about these things, and I go, well, Chuck's a smart guy. That must be the deal. Yeah. And now there's just times I look at him and go, well, there's giants. Yeah. That'll do.
Yeah.
I don't, there just were. I'm not quite sure. Were there, fallen angels, sexually involved and engaged with human women? I don't know. It's not like everybody can go slam dunk, this is the real deal. We know there was a Noah.
Yeah.
And we know that for sure. Mm-hmm. And we know that he built an ark. We know that for sure. But all those other kinds of things, like, I'm not quite sure what that is. So when you get to a giant, I'm just going, well, that's a giant.
Yeah. But at least what we're doing is we're brainstorming.
Yeah.
This stuff's tough. I mean, I was thinking about, like, even things like, my brain was thinking the other day, like, man, those people who are living like 800 years or 900 years, like, what would have been like if they lost their teeth and you had to go without teeth for like 800 years? Or what if you were crippled for 800 years? Or what would it be like to be married to the same person for 800 years? I mean, there's all these kind of questions that can be in there. Remember, honey, on our anniversary 750 years ago?
Yeah. How old were you? Were you 600 or 700 years old when you forgot where you put your keys?
Yes.
800 candles for your birthday. Let's blow, man. You better have some big oxygen in those lungs.
Oh, man. Candace, thank you for your phone call. We're out of time today, but we will be back tomorrow. We would love to hear from you then from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. For Bobby Conway and Richard Cimino, I'm Brian Perez, and Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.